But as part of what we have to do to focus on this future, that includes the changes that are happening to society as a whole and its impact that are becoming to the state and really the world. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Subrahmanian. I think I pronounced that wrong this time. I've done it right once. He's one of the world's foremost experts in artificial intelligence. He has developed methods to apply AI models to a variety of real-world scenarios, such as analyzing the behavior of terrorist groups. The professor also develops forecasting models that have helped predict systematic banking crises, the spread of violence at protests, and the spread of malware in countries. He'll share some of his vast knowledge of this rapidly evolving technology with us today. Please welcome Dr. V.S. Subrahmanian.
Thanks, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. And hopefully my slides are up. I wanted to mention that this morning in the panel on tax policy, we heard the word misinformation mentioned a few times. Senator Reese, Secretary Nelson both brought it up. My talk this afternoon is about deepfakes, an instrument that we think of as something enabling disinformation, an explicit desire to portray something in a false light. Oops.
Hello,
Oops.
I'm Dr. Stephen Procopio, president of PAR, or at least a deepfake version of him. I've been manipulated by artificial intelligence to say what you are hearing now. I, for one, would like to thank our new AI overlords. I hope you all are enjoying PAR's annual conference. I can assure you, machines at this conference are completely friendly.
So that's a deep fake of Stephen, produced with his consent by somebody in my lab. And you can see it's pretty realistic. When we created this, we had 8 or 9 versions of Stephen. You know, some facing sideways, some with glasses on, some without, with different kinds of background. And I think they all look pretty realistic. So this is just one we chose to show you today. What about these? I know you can't read this, unfortunately, but each of these is what we call a multimodal fake. So think of a tweet or a post on your favorite social platform, which may have a combination of types of data represented in it. So even if you can't read what's at the top of these slides, these 4 panels, that's text that looks very much like a tweet or a post on your social platform. And you know, if you'd been able to take a closer look at it, I would have asked you to guess and raise your hands and tell me if you think these are real or fake for each of them. So you know, I'll just take a stab at it. How many of you think A is real? All right, a couple of people. What about B? A few more. C? Nobody? Okay. And D? All right. So these are all fake. And that's kind of how I keep my, I remember which is which. But if you take a closer look at these, literally closer by being inches away from it in front of your computer screen, they're actually pretty good. They're hard to tell for a human whether they're real or fake. And that has sort of profound implications. I was warned that there were going to be lots of lawyers at this meeting today, but not Supreme Court judges. So we did some work sometime between the summer of 2023 in a paper that was published in December with a team of lawyers in the Chicago area and a retired district court judge from Maryland and at the time at least, and I don't know if he still is, a serving district court judge in Minnesota, to look at how you might deal with allegations of deepfake use if you're in a courtroom, and in particular, how judges should do so. And we sort of framed this paper because of the following problem. So we did, at that time, things have changed a little bit now, but not, hugely for the better. We said, well, let's look at this deepfake detection challenge that a major social platform announced publicly. And let's look at the top detectors of deepfakes. This was deepfake video, and see how well they do. And if you look at this table, there are 4 columns to the right, and those were the 4 of the top detectors that placed really at the top in the challenge. This was data that the major social platform had provided and evaluated in a rigorous way. We tested it on other videos, including ones that we'd gathered from the internet, including ones that we generated in our lab, and other sources. And what you notice, so the first 2 columns, the first row looks at the false positive rate. How frequently does a detector say something is a deep fake when it's not? All right? So you want false positive rates to be low. Somebody says this is a deep fake, and therefore, you really expect it to be a deep fake when they say that. If they're wrong, oftentimes, you're not very happy. What we realized was that, so you look at this row, which says real videos, and say, these guys did really well. They all have low numbers for false positive rates. Well, the reason was they declared almost everything to be real, so we couldn't measure, so if I looked at their false negative rate, it would go up dramatically. In the next 2 rows, you look at the false negative rate, which perhaps concerns people a lot more. When they declare something to be real, how likely is it to be really real? And if it's wrong, then that's a false negative. And here, you can see that the numbers are very large. They're in the 70, 80, 90% ranges, depending on which data you look at and which of the 4 detectors you look at. So if you look at the last 2 rows, those numbers are all high, which says most of the time they declare something to be real, it's often a fake. So this should give pause to anybody who's worrying about this. And we therefore crafted, as our multidisciplinary team looked at it, a very simple scenario, an election interference scenario where, there were 2 hypothetical candidates, Eric and Connie, running for president. By the way, this was all put together in 2023 before we knew the identity of some of the candidates. So please excuse, there's no blatant politicization of this. It was just the way the timing. And at some point, there were allegations that were leveled through artifacts released publicly that Connie was having an affair with a Chinese diplomatic official. This is a picture that was also generated by somebody on my team. Just for the record, I didn't produce these pictures. People on my team who, students, postdocs, who are really dedicated, outstanding young men and women did much of the work that I'm talking about today, just to give fair credit. In addition, there was an audio that was available on the web or the internet in this hypothetical scenario where Connie's asking for dollars from a phone registered apparently in Beijing. So Connie gets upset and says, well, my rights are being violated under the Voting Rights Act. Again, please bear in mind that I'm not a lawyer, so when you ask questions, I can't answer anything more substantive than the legal content I'm talking about. I'm using this just as an example to show you what's going on and why this is so challenging. And then during discovery, Connie's team realizes that a large number of bots were sending out messages, and some of these bots at least were sending out messages circulating perhaps some of this information from an IP address that was registered to her competitor's campaign. So our judges who were working on this and the other lawyers involved said, well, there are 4 scenarios we need to worry about. And these are shown in this simple matrix. There's the possibility that in reality, of course, the other candidate denies any of this is fake. He says this is all real stuff to the best of his knowledge. So there are 4 possibilities. The allegation is that it's real, and it really is real. The allegation is that it's false, and it really is false. So those are the two cells colored blue on this chart. And alternatively, the two cells colored red are ones where the allegation is that it's real, but in reality, it's fake, and vice versa. So those are the two scenarios which our judges on our team or our project wanted to worry about. And they said, you know, if it's a jury trial, how do we ensure that allegations of a particular piece of evidence, being a deep fake, are handled in a way that does not prejudice the jury? Because there's independent research, not done by us, but by others, showing that once somebody sees or hears a deep fake, it's really hard for them to get it out of their heads. And that could taint the jury pool. Of course, it could also shape public perception, which might also taint the jury pool in terms of who you might select. So what we did is proposed a potential way by which judges could handle this. It's certainly not the be-all and the end-all. And again, you know, it was a multidisciplinary effort by two current or former district court judges, lawyers from the Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, and a few computer scientists like me who could tell them what's going on from the perspective of efficacy of detection of whether something is real or a deep fake. So motivated in part by this, but also by the fact that I was being bombarded with artifacts being sent to me largely by reporters saying, hey, can you look at this and tell us if this is real or fake? And so we built out a system called GODS. It's not sort of as godly as it sounds. We hoped it would be fairly close to being right. And it stands for Global Online Deepfake Detection System. I'm only allowed in GODS to say something is likely real or likely fake, not whether something is real or fake. So I'll try and stick to that message. And so that was our Northwestern's lawyers who, you know. So I'm going to play a video now and ask you to guess, real or fake.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you personally for all the wonderful messages of support and for your understanding whilst I've been recovering from surgery. It has been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family.
Okay, so let's not worry about that. The rest of that video, you heard enough of that. What do you think, real or fake? Real? All right, well, you guys are really good. Okay, so that really was real. And let me rephrase that. That really was likely real. And here's another one of billionaire, this is a deep fake, I'm telling you this in advance, of billionaire Mukesh Ambani.
Trust your own judgment. Do you really think you can make money with your stocks? Follow me and my student, Mr. Vinit. We will provide you with free stock diagnosis and investment plan customization and recommend stocks.
All right, I'm going to stop with that. But I just wanted to say that, you know, so that's a deepfake video. And what you notice here is that it's basically this billionaire being impersonated via a deepfake, selling an investment product. And so that's really a scam. We know the artifact was a deepfake. We're pretty sure that he did not authorize this. But one thing to remember is almost everybody who detects deepfakes today with an algorithm look at the artifact. In other words, they say, here's this image that was sent to us to analyze, or here's this video, here's this audio clip. And our perspective was that's only part of the picture. So just think about your own experience as ordinary citizens, or I should perhaps say distinguished citizens of Louisiana, and somebody says something to you. Do you solely believe the statement on the basis of what was said or the way it was said when the person spoke to you? How many of you would do that? All right, I don't see many hands up. And so what we said is, well, there's a tremendous amount of context that goes into assessing whether something is likely to be real or likely to be fake. We as humans do that all the time. It was kind of idiotic that a lot of the computational models to do this that were out there, including ones by very, very famous universities, major corporations, weren't taking context into account. And if you look just at deepfake, if you just look at deepfake detectors that add context to it, they get an improvement of about 10 to 15% in predictive accuracy. Now, you might say an improvement of 10 to 15% is not a lot, but it's a lot when you're climbing this steep hill. So we're very pleased about that, and that's stuff that we pioneered in our lab. We were also told by our lawyers that we could only offer this as a service to journalists under various kinds of conditions. So, I just wanted to say that even though my intent originally was to open this up for anybody to use, we were, a little bit, I should say, put back in our box. So I've said a lot about deepfakes being bad, and is there a good side to this? So certainly there are a lot of companies that are using deepfakes to track conversations or meetings, create minutes and summaries of minutes really fast, okay? When I say deepfakes now, I should rephrase that. I meant generative technologies in general, of which deepfakes is one part. There are several models out there, very, very famous now, to automatically create, say, designer proteins to solve very specific healthcare requirements and to treat diseases in a way that significantly reduces the lead time to discover those proteins and significantly reduce costs by saying, well, we've run this through these simulators, these generative models, and here's what we came up with, and now we can test just a few in the lab rather than potentially trying out hundreds, which takes both time, money, and equipment. There are many others, but I thought I'd give you one, which is sort of near and dear to my heart, which is protecting intellectual property. So one thing that we learned through a study that Symantec, the cybersecurity company, did a few years back was that on average, the time between the initial compromise of an organization by an advanced persistent threat attack or a zero-day attack, which is an attack that uses a vulnerability that was not previously known to the scientific or security community at large, but was known to the perpetrator. Does anybody want to guess how many days that was between that time and the time of discovery? So I don't mean a ransomware attack or a DDoS attack, which you would know immediately because you'd see a demand for ransom or you'd see your network choke. But this is an attack where the actor, the threat actor, is siphoning off your data or your IP. So any takers on what that gap is between initial point of time of compromise to the discovery? 30 days? Sorry? I wish. Okay, thank you all. So Symantec study found that that was 312 days. All right? So what that means is if the Chinese government compromises your network, there's a good chance that that specific compromise might take months at least. Maybe not 312 days if you're lucky, but might take months before you even discover it, and during that time, they're siphoning off IP from your company. So what we said was, how do we protect an organization, protect its IP, when it doesn't even know it's been hacked, doesn't know when it's been hacked? What can you do? So we said, well, fakes are my friend here. Can I generate, so if you're an inventor I was speaking to somebody who works for a major air conditioning company earlier, and or who owns one, and if you have IP for your company, then one thing you could do, and you're an inventor, one thing you could do when you go to save your invention on your device is to automatically, say, generate 99 fake versions of it, all right? As long as those fake versions are highly credible, but a little different from the real thing. You've now got 100 versions of that document on your system, and the adversary is going to have to spend some time, money, and effort to figure out which one is the real one. And even if he knows that 99 are fake, he still has the same problem. He's got to spend time and money to suss out the real thing from the fakes. And so, this is what we figured out how to do, and we've applied it also to data breaches. Another example is in countering phishing. So how many of those present in the audience have experienced a phishing attack at work, perhaps? All right, I'll raise my hand as well, okay? Almost everybody, has an organization that has encountered phishing, successful or otherwise. And so, generative models can really help here. So one example is when a news event occurs, say, a rebate of some sort, a tax rebate of some sort. Again, no expert on taxes, but I'm sort of inspired by the talk by the panel this morning. So if you announce a new tax rebate, guess what? The first thing that any threat actor is going to do is to say, how can I leverage this? And you'll suddenly see phishing messages coming out of the ether, targeting anybody they think might potentially respond to it, And all the threat actors are looking for is a small percentage of the people who receive these messages to fall victim to it. And that victimization could have monetary consequences for the individual who fell for it, but also for their companies. Okay. So we said, well, when a world event occurs, we can automatically generate deepfakes of phishing messages or generative phishing messages by ourselves, and then train our detection models on that. So if you're a major email provider, for example, they're tracking the news all the time, right? I mean, every major email provider typically has an interface where you go in there, they're tracking everything that's going on in the world. They can generate this, in fact, much faster than I can. And they can train their detectors dynamically to recognize potential new deepfakes. Potential new phishing messages that might emerge. So in other words, get ahead of the bad guys. And these big corporations have a huge strategic advantage. They have far more computational resources and far more data than the bad guys do. So criminal actor in a foreign country has far fewer resources, can't act quite as fast as big providers of this kind of thing. And then there's countering malware. So for those of you who understand how cybersecurity works, we see the same malware evolving with time. So typically the threat actor releases a piece of malware, spyware, banking Trojan, whatever, ransomware. And as the cybersecurity companies figure out how to block it and detect it, they notice that their payoff drops, regardless of what kind of payoff it is, dollars or data. And so they tweak their malware to evade the defenses. And this turns out to be a pretty horrific cycle. So there are other questions, such as, can the big cybersecurity firms, when they see a sample of malware, can they automatically generate 1,000 variations of it? And then train their detection models on those, so that even if none of those 1,000 ever show up in the wild, they can do much better in detecting other things because they've built something that's seen a lot more than the one that they'd seen before, or two. So those are the kinds of some of the kinds of advantages that we can see in the use of generative models. And again, you probably can't read this, but obviously generative models are very, very useful in generating deep fakes for personalized advertising, for example. So if you're running internet advertising for your company, no malicious or malign intent, just to promote sales, hopefully honestly, of course, then you can generate this almost instantaneously by using deepfake technology. These are some examples. So I know I'm probably running out of time, all right? So, so let me say a little bit about the regulatory picture. And so my perspective is I like regulation with a light touch as opposed to heavy-handed regulation so that innovation is spurred and so that, but at the same time, we want malign actors to feel deterred at the very least and punished if they cross certain boundaries. So a little bit about, again, I don't follow legal bills and amendments with the same enthusiasm or competence that many of you in this room have. So almost all of you in the room follow perhaps the bills in the local and federal, at the federal level, as well as the state and local levels, much more religiously and enthusiastically than I would. But just a little bit, so we know that in terms of deepfakes involving political content, some states, I've only listed a couple here, there are more, have outright banned the use of deepfakes in political campaign settings. Now, that's a little tricky, and again, I'm not the right guy to say where the lines should be drawn. I'm just going to point out some of the implications. So if you have a district or an electoral campaign in a place with a population of, let's say, Latinos, and you are a candidate and you want to garner that vote, you might want, and you don't speak Spanish, right? You might want a deepfake version of your message, your videos in English, automatically rendered with you speaking Spanish, and I don't think that's so bad. Now, and that's been done around the world in elections. We've got tons of data coming in over the years from, actually God's was not over the years, over the last year and a half or so. God's was made public on July 8th of last year, so it's been used by journalists for about 9 or 10 months since then. I didn't do the math, so sorry, but something like that. So in cases like that, there's also the alternative perspective that, hey, maybe that little ad with the candidate speaking in Spanish when he doesn't do so in his normal life, perhaps it should be labeled with a note saying that this is a deepfake rendering of this candidate's regular English speech. And there are some states that have adopted this position that using deepfakes is okay as long as it's clearly labeled as such. Now, obviously, there are other laws that come into play. So a deepfake that is slandering another candidate would probably be covered under, hopefully, those laws. So again, and the violations of these kinds of laws, the penalties run quite a wide spectrum. From outright banning the candidate from running for election, the one who's believed to have perpetrated it, which, by the way, raises another question I've not brought up, which is how do you pin the blame? Even if it's a deep fake that is trashing another candidate, how do you pin the blame on the candidate who's the presumed opponent of the target of the deep fake? Not so easy. Okay? And I don't think the technology is quite there yet to do that in a very, very rigorous way. If the person perpetrating the deep fake is smart enough, he can probably figure out a way to pin the blame on some third parties somewhere else. Another major issue that I think most of us would agree with is intimate imagery, especially the kind of thing that's used for sextortion, etc. So again, I think most of us agree that that's not something that's desirable, and we don't want deep fakes to be used for that kind of thing. Again, women see this happening way more frequently than men, of course, in terms of being victims. And so several states, some of which are listed here, have banned that outright. Okay, I'm almost done. Have banned that outright. CSAM, which is videos of children in being sexually abused, of course, is horrifying and should be banned outright as well. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is there's deep fakes that are of various kinds of intimate scenes or imagery which are shown to children, and obviously that's something which is also undesirable. So I think I'll just say a word about this. Every once in a while, I see something which says so-and-so entity in Washington, a government entity, has declared that they plan to use deep fakes for some instrument of state policy. And in fact, in my own lab, some years back, we developed a system called TREAD, which stands for Terrorism Reduction with AI Deepfakes. TREAD was motivated by the fact that we had a previous finding in a separate piece of work that for certain terrorist groups, if their leaders are squabbling with each other and there's internal dissension within the group, they typically, in some cases at least, for some groups, they don't carry out attacks. You can, agree or disagree on the morality of inducing dissension between two bad guys. To me, that was fine. If it protected normal civilians, I was perfectly okay with that. And so there, you've got a potential application of deep fakes where it's used as an instrument of state policy to say, well, such and such intelligence agency or defense department is going to generate deep fakes for the purpose of countering terrorism. Nevertheless, even that raises a number of questions. So we did some work saying, well, how should the government decide when to use deepfakes in pursuance of security interests of the nation versus when not to? And at the very least, what are the questions to ask? The slide gives you some of the questions. We posed 7 questions in all. But what we really recommended was a creation of something called the Deepfake Equities Process, or DEP, which is similar to what the US government uses in the case of the Vulnerability Equities Process, or VEP, which is used when the government finds a vulnerability in a cyber vulnerability in a product and makes a decision about whether to use it in the pursuit of national security goals or to disclose it to the vendor in question so that the vendor can fix the bug. So I'll stop with that. I'm probably over my time. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions. Do I have to turn mine off, maybe?
No, I don't think so. So we need artificial intelligence helping us pick up the microphone. So, let's see. I don't want any feedback. Let's see.
I'll stand a little further away.
All right, so we just have a couple of questions. Now, I really want to first point out is I have a couple of questions I've already gathered, but you all should all have question cards at your table. And I promise you, as much as he told us already, he knows a bunch more. So I know you're going to have questions about artificial intelligence. Please fill those out. We'll ask a couple of questions here, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before we begin. I hope y'all heard me. Turn in your question cards. So, all right, so my first question is a broad one. What is your largest worry about the future of artificial intelligence, and what is your biggest hope?
Well, my largest worry, oops, sorry. Okay, I think it works now. My largest worry, simply put, is China, all right? China is able to do things that we don't do. They were able to surveil huge sections of their population and train models, which we don't do. When I say surveil, I mean visual surveillance through cameras everywhere, through face recognition code, through very good code, actually, high-quality code, to pick out faces in a large crowd, and in many cases, even partially obscured faces. They have developed these models simply because they can. And that poses a national security threat. They have developed tons of extremely good drones, for example, which are capable, which are quite cheap. I mean, in fact, a lot of the drones in the US, sold in the US, such as DJI drones, are sold by Chinese companies. Those are Chinese products. So they're making extremely fast headway, Steve, in AI, not just in deepfakes. They're training models, and we need to up our game. We're doing a good job thus far, but this is a clear and present danger to us, a geopolitical risk that we need to address as soon and as effectively as possible.
What about your biggest hope? Your biggest hope?
Well, my biggest hope, especially as I get older, is that generative AI will help us get to the cures, or at least methods to mitigate the harmful effects of various diseases that we're all going to suffer. As we get older, there's a greater chance of getting things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc. And if we can come up with generative AI models to help speed the process in the search for a cure, I would be thrilled. And I think most people would.
Yeah. Okay, I got another question. Legislation already struggles to keep up with technology in general. So what do you think about the idea of creating something like a digital Bill of Rights for citizens?
Oh, gosh. So let me start by saying I don't know all the answers. So I think obviously, citizens have lots of rights, but sometimes those rights conflict with the rights of others. And sometimes even the rights we have conflict with other rights that we might have. So I think in principle this is good. In practice, the devil will be in exactly how the laws are written and how they're implemented.
Fantastic. I got a question. I'll be honest, I don't completely understand it, so I hope you do. All right. Do you believe artificial general intelligence is possible or probable? If so, what is the timeline? And you might want to start off by telling us what that is.
All right, great. So AGI, or artificial general intelligence, refers to doing a lot more than what we see in AI today. So if you look at machine learning models today, they can predict all kinds of things. They are making significant headway in separating likely real versus likely artifacts. They're making significant headway in predicting risk of earthquakes or volcanic eruptions in certain places. Lots of headway being made there. Of course, AGI says something a lot more than that. We as humans know how to take predictions we believe and act in accordance with those predictions. We can reason about the potential consequences on acting on a piece of advice and saying, hey, what happens if that piece of advice was right versus wrong? How do I mitigate my risk in case I'm acting on this piece of advice that's, let's say you get a piece of advice from somebody who's been right 90% of the time that person has advised you, but wrong every once in a while. So all of us can be wrong, and so you want to be able to make decisions as a human being, and we all do it all the time, right? How do I act so that I protect myself against the risks that the advice we're getting are wrong? So AGI is basically talking about way beyond just predictive modeling, generative modeling. It's talking about planning. It's planning about the possible future outcomes that might occur, not just in how we act, but how others might act in the environment around us, a lot more. So there's a lot of controversy around AGI, and one of the reasons for that is Jeff Hinton, who was one of the inventors of deep neural networks at the University of Toronto, just got the Nobel Prize in physics a few months back, has been extremely worried, and publicly so, that AI is going to destroy humanity, all right? And that's, I'm not seeing that happening at this point. I'm not seeing a big risk of that, and I think the risk of that, even if there's a long-term risk down the road, can be mitigated by smart regulatory policies and perhaps the relevant international agreements to the extent possible.
We can add it to the list that might destroy humanity. Okay, one last thing, because you brought up Chinese. This is the last question. Is so there's a Chinese company that created a DeepSeek. It was another AI model. It made all the headlines. It's going to be faster and cheaper and everything else. What happened to that? Was that overblown, or do we know more?
Well, okay. So I would say that all I know is everything that I've read publicly about DeepSeek, and in some cases heard from colleagues in the field. who may not know have access to any private information either. So the big thing with DeepSeek is that it was able to train generative models similar to ChatGPT, for example, using a fraction of the computing power and resources that were being used by many of the major large language model developers in the US, okay? So think, the big companies. Again, I try to be very careful about mentioning any of these companies. So if that is in fact, the claims are in fact correct, and there is some evidence to suggest that people have taken, so DeepSeek did one more thing, which is open source much of their stuff. So people can download it and look at it. So there's some evidence that they weren't lying about the claim. And so, but I don't know that it's been vetted thoroughly thus far. But it's been certainly looked at, and I haven't seen people standing up saying this is all lies in terms of the claims. So that's an example, Stephen, of the Chinese threat that I see coming. China has invested, 30 years back, Chinese education was basically terrible, okay? College education. There were plenty of smart guys in China, don't get me wrong. But the quality of the university system in China was quite weak in, say, the early 90s. That has changed dramatically. Now we see that China has made significant investments in improving the quality of their universities, and that investment is paying off. A lot of these students come to the US, study at US universities, the Stanfords and the MITs of the world, occasionally the Northwesterns as well. And they learn a lot. And so when you combine the fact that they have a highly educated workforce, especially in tech, that their government appears to steal intellectual property without batting an eyelid, the threat is very significant.
Thank you so very much. Can we please have a round of applause for, I think, our fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I've left this here.
Thank you again. That was fantastic. To the members in our audience, thank you so much for all your support now and over the years. I want to point out there is in your program, there's a QR code you can scan if you want to learn more about PAR, subscribe to us, become a member, make a donation. One thing I want to point out, we actually had 2 substantive donations just while we were here, one in memory of David Eustace. Thank you so very much for doing that. I think the Eustace family really appreciates that. Oops. Again, it's amazing to think about the number of people, y'all, that support PAR and good government. You don't get anything directly beneficial to what we do. We don't represent your interests specifically. We're trying to make Louisiana a better place for everyone through our research and the knowledge that we share and our policy recommendations. And it still is astounding to me that there are people willing to take time and effort and their money to support us. Thank y'all very much, and y'all have a good afternoon.